Thank you, President Linda. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Acting U.S. Marshal Lasha Boyden. She's the Marshal for the Eastern District of California in the U.S. Marshal Service, part of the United States Department of Justice. Marshal Boyden was designated to her post by the U.S. Attorney General William P. Barr in 2020, and then she was redesignated in 21 by U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland the next year. Marshal Boyden is the first African-American woman to serve as a marshal in any of the 4 districts in our state. The Eastern District has 34, boy, yes indeed, that's a big deal. The Eastern District has 34 of California's 58 counties, and the Marshal's Office has several duties. One is to protect the federal judiciary, so we know Bill Shub is safe. And the next, they run the Fugitive Apprehension Program. They also coordinate prisoner operations and transportation. They execute court orders and seize assets. They go get the $500,000 boat at Lake Tahoe and drag it into the whatever. They also support the Federal Witness Protection Program. So if that's your next stop, you met her here. Marshal Boyden commenced her service in the Marshal's Office in 2002 in Alabama, following which she had held several positions in 5 different Marshal's offices, including Alabama, New Mexico, Fresno, and now Sacramento. She received her bachelor's degree in criminal justice at Alabama State University in 2003. There, she was on a track and field scholarship. I asked her what her event was. She's a sprinter, so that puts her well in position to catch those fugitives. All 4 years that Marshal Boyden ran for the Alabama State team, they won the conference championship. In 2015, she earned her executive MBA at the University of New Mexico, and in 2020, she received her International Association of Chiefs of Police 40 Under 40 Award. That's a group that honors 40 chief law enforcement people around the world who are under age 40, and they have demonstrated leadership, commitment to their profession, and have demonstrated a positive impact on their community. It's a great pleasure. Please give a warm Rotary welcome to Marshal Lasha Boyden.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for having me today. It is truly an honor to be here at the Sacramento Rotary Club. This is my first time here. And it's great to be amongst friends because we all have one goal in mind, and that's to serve our communities. And so I just want to thank you as well for your service. So today I'm going to talk to you about a few different things, partly my path as to why I got into law enforcement, those who have inspired me along the way, and lessons that I've learned as I've moved up the chain of command. So a lot of people ask me, Lasha, why did you get into law enforcement? Everybody's curious about that. Well, I grew up in Kennesaw, Georgia, and in the 80s and 90s, it was not very diverse. I experienced a lot of discrimination, a lot of racism. So there's many reasons why I want to get into law enforcement, but there's one experience in particular that was really the passion for my calling. And this experience happened when I was in 7th grade. This was around Christmas break, and your parents drop you off at the mall, and you walk around and be cute and hang out with your friends. So I was just walking in the mall, and out of the blue, this Caucasian adult woman came up and just pushed me out of the blue, like for no reason. So my natural response was, "Hey!" Right? Like anyone else would. Well, then she turns around and then she grabs me with this death grip, and she says, well, what are you going to do about it? I mean, she said it like I was like nothing, like I was powerless, right? And so as she continued to hold me in that death grip, I began to get a full description head to toe of what she looked like. Because one thing my mom always taught me at a young age was to always get the details, get the who, the what, the where, the why, were there witnesses. So I'm looking at her, I'm like, okay, she's got dirty blonde hair, she's got green eyes, she's wearing a Christmas sweater, red Christmas sweater, and blue jeans. So after she let go of my arm, I immediately proceeded to find the mall police. Now, the interesting thing about this experience was that when I went to the mall police, and he did not look like me, but when I told him what happened, he actually believed me, right? He believed me, and he wanted to help me find her. So we began to canvass the mall, looking for the lady who had essentially assaulted me. So as we're walking in the mall and we're scanning, and based on that fine description that I gave, we were able to locate her. And so the officer says, okay, stay over here. You and Toya stay over here, and I'll go talk to her. So I see him go talk to her, and I can't hear them, but they're talking. I see her give, the ID to him, and I see her look around, and then bam, we lock eyes. And I knew within that moment that her question had been answered. I knew that she would think twice before bullying another young Black girl. So what am I going to do about it? I'm going to hold bullies like you accountable, and that's still what I do today. All right, so now I'll get into the history of the Marshal Service. And as the gentleman spoke earlier about our history, yes, we are the very first law enforcement agency ever established in 1789. So our roots really run deep here in this country. We were here when George Washington appointed the first 16 United States Marshals. Now, the interesting thing about Marshals is that we had so much power. We took orders from Congress, from the judge, whatever we need to do, we were the enforcers, right? So one way to tame that power was marshals were the only office at the time that actually had an automatic expiration in the time that they could serve. So as it still is today, United States Marshals serve at the pleasure of the president. So you could serve 4 years with the possible renewable 4 years again, and as it was then, that's still the case today. So, 61 years later, after we became an organization, the Fugitive Slave Act was created. This was one of the most roundly hated and violently opposed laws in American history. For 11 years, United States Marshals were responsible for returning runaway slaves that fled the South to the North to the free states. Now, that's why the story of Frederick Douglass is so inspirational, but we'll get back to him in a minute. Regardless of how marshals felt about this hated law, the Constitution itself required that free states return fugitive slaves. To deny that law meant to deny the Constitution, and marshals always upheld the law, and that still holds true today. No matter what our personal feelings are, we swear to an oath to serve and protect, and that's what we still do today. Now, a century later, continuing to enforce our nation's laws, marshals were sent south to help enforce the civil rights under the 14th and 15th Amendments. Now, as you all see here in the picture, I'm pretty sure you all know who Ruby Bridges is. She's a very famous person when it comes to talk about integrating into schools. She was the first African-American child to integrate into a school in New Orleans in the South. Now, she was only a first grader, just simply trying to get an education. She received several death threats. They talked about poisoning her food. So she had to bring her food every day, but it was United States Marshals that protected her. They picked her up from her house, they took her to school, stayed with her, and then took her home. It was also United States Marshals who also escorted James Meredith. He was the first African American to integrate into Ole Miss. Marshals also walked with blacks in Selma, Alabama to help register to vote. Again, we uphold the law. Now, as we get into our marshal's office today, this is a picture of me and my team, which I'm very proud of. That's our director there, standing there in the middle. And we actually received 4 national awards this year at the Department of Justice in front of our current Attorney General Merrick Garland and the Deputy Attorney General. We received those awards for, we got Law Enforcement Officer of the Year, Court Security Officer of the Year, Citizen of the Year, which Paris Dye received that award. And we also got Task Force Award of the Year. So you all have a great marshal's office right here in your district. We have offices in Sacramento, Fresno, and Bakersfield, and we always sit wherever there is a federal courthouse. Now, before I get into what our mission areas are, it's important to describe the area that we cover. As the judge mentioned, we are one of 4 districts, and we cover 34 of the 58 counties. Now, although we're the big section in the purple, that's my area of responsibility. And there's only 4 marshals in California, which means there's only 4 gold badges. If you guys see my badge, it's gold. Everyone else, our deputy U.S. marshals, they have silver badges. So even though we don't have any coastal or beach or ocean, we have an absolutely beautiful area that we're responsible for. That includes Lake Tahoe, Yosemite. We have the largest 1% of topsoil patch in the world right here in the Central Valley. We feed a quarter of our nation in food. So we have a very impressive district that I'm very proud to serve as the marshal. Now, when we get into what our areas of responsibility are, judicial security, it is our job to protect all federal judges. We protect them in court. If they do any public events, we're there to make sure they're safe. If they get any threats, we protect them. Now, if you all remember when Justice Kavanaugh had that threat where Roski from California went out to DC and he planned to kill Justice Kavanaugh, well, it was United States Marshals who were actually sitting at his house making sure he was safe. And when Roski walked up to the house, the deputy U.S. Marshal that got out of the car to confront him works right here in our Sacramento office. And so we are proud of the work that we do to protect our judges. All right, we're also over fugitive apprehension. So we arrest more fugitives than all federal agencies combined. We've been doing it for a long time, right? We talked about the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. We expert in locating and hunting down fugitives. And that's partly due to our task forces, right? We work very closely with our state and local partners in order to locate and apprehend and arrest violent fugitives. We arrest the worst of the worst. We are also over prisoner operations. And what that means is we kind of serve as like the sheriff of the feds. And I know Sheriff Cooper was here not too long ago. The difference between me and Sheriff Cooper is that I don't have a jail, and my responsibility is the entire nation. But whenever there's any federal arrests that are made by FBI or ATF or DEA, they bring those arrestees to the marshal's office. We fingerprint them, give them a photo, and then they have a marshal number that stays with them from the beginning to the end of their time in federal custody. And we also transport and extradite fugitives back into this country. We also manage and sell seized assets. And so what that means is if you have, let's say, a drug dealer who has all this money and he bought a house with that illegal money, he bought a car, jewelry, it's United States Marshals that go into that home and we seize that house, we seize that car, the jewelry, the yacht. So when you hear about the Marshal Service car auctions, that's what that is. And what we do with that money after we sell it is we return it to victims, and we also put it back into the law enforcement community. We also recover missing children, and we are also over the Witness Protection Program. Now, since its inception in 1971, there's been about 20,000 people that have been in that program. And I'm proud to say that while under the protection of United States Marshals, not a single person has ever been hurt, harmed, or in danger while under protection of Deputy United States Marshals. Thank you, thank you. All right, so you guys heard me talk about Frederick Douglass earlier. So, and he's such an inspirational person to me personally. And many of you know, he was born a slave in 1817 in Talbot County, Maryland. Douglass escaped slavery in 1838 when he was only 22 years old. And, he was a runaway slave. But shortly after that, he began speaking out against slavery. Now, one thing that was unique about Frederick Douglass is that he was educated. He could speak, right? He could write. He had many slave owners, but one of the slave owners' wives took a liking to him when he was younger and decided to teach him how to read and write. And he did everything he could to keep up with those skills, whether it's writing the dirt with his finger, stealing books, whatever he could do, because he knew that knowledge was power. He began speaking out against slavery. He was a great orator. He knew how to move a crowd. He was an author. He was a national leader. Did you all know that he was the first Black to ever be appointed by a president in the United States? Do you all know what office he was appointed to? Well, I'm proud to tell you that in 1877, Frederick Douglass became the first presidentially appointed United States Marshal. He served in the District of Maryland for 4 years. He was appointed under Republican President Rutherford B. Hayes, like I said, in the District of Columbia. So in his transformation from a runaway slave to a federal law enforcement officer symbolizes the resiliency of the American spirit in the face of humbling and trying times. I stand on the shoulders of Frederick Douglass. One thing that we do have in common is that we're both the first. He was the first ever. I was the first here in California. Now, when I was a baby deputy in 2003, I learned at that time that there had never been an African-American woman to ever serve in the position of a U.S. Marshal or a Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal. I was perturbed by this because these are the top 2 positions in the field, and an agency that had been around at that point for 214 years had yet to see its first Black female leader. So I set out to fill that void. I said, you know what? I'm gonna blaze that trail. I'm gonna be the first. That was a goal of mine, very young in the agency. Although I wasn't the first in either one of those categories, I am proud to say that Beverly Harvard became the first. She was appointed under President Barack Obama in 2010, 220 years since the inception of the Marshal Service and 133 years after the appointment of Frederick Douglass. Now, let's see. So at this time that she was appointed, I was a supervisor. And in 2016, I got promoted to Fresno, California to be the Assistant Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal. I was one step away from achieving my goal of becoming a Chief Deputy, right? One promotion, one step away. But then life happened. I was devastated to learn in 2018, at the precious age of 38, that I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. My kids were only 18 months and 3 years old at the time. And I have to tell you, devastation is, I can't even describe it. If you hear people talk about the dark night of the soul, I had many of those nights, right? Because it's like, how could this happen to me? I'm this athlete, I'm good, I believe in God, all these things. And I really struggled. And once I finally got out of that darkness and I began to see the light again, I began to see me as living and being healthy. I said, I want to be here for my kids. My kids need me. They can't grow up without me. So I had to dig deep and find that hope again that I would get through this. I began believing again that, you know what, I'm still only a step away from being the chief deputy, right? So 6 months after my diagnosis, and I had gone through chemo. As you can see, I lost all my hair, radiation, surgery, all the things. And my boss left about 6 months after this happened. And it was like, oh gosh, the chief position is coming open in Sacramento. Like, I can still do this. I'm not going to let cancer stop me. I can get through this. So I applied for the job. And this is me on my first day as a chief deputy in Sacramento. So go Team Sarah. You got this, girl. And so it was such a blessing. It gave me life again. Like I knew, okay, God still has a plan for me. And little did I know that 8 months later, United States Attorney Bill Barr wanted to designate me to be the U.S. Marshal. And so in 2020, I became the acting U.S. Marshal. Chief Judge Kim Mueller swore me in at that time. It was in February, right before the pandemic hit. And then I got designated by Merrick Garland in March of this year. And that's Judge Nunley who is swearing me in now. And also just want to give a shout out to him because he's getting the Judge of the Year award tonight. All right. So in order for me to get to where I am today, I obviously had to overcome a lot. And not just cancer, right? But just being who I am in the field that I'm in. And so in order for me to get here, there's lessons I learned, such as you cannot hold grudges in leadership. It will only hold you back. Now, being a woman in a male-dominated field, and an African-American woman at that, there are inherent challenges in terms of people taking you seriously, right? Constantly having to prove yourself. As I rose through the ranks, I ended up supervising those who didn't like me, who wanted to hold me back, who were against me. But if not for forgiveness and grace, I could have easily been vengeful or vindictive and misused my power like I've seen others do. You have to forgive those who have wronged you. Forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for you. You have to also extend grace, right? What is grace? Doing something nice or kind for someone who doesn't deserve it. And that's hard to do, I'm telling you. But you have to give people the opportunity to show that they've learned their lesson. You have to give them the space to make that positive change. And that's how I've been able to turn my enemies into my allies. Frederick Douglass went from a runaway slave to a presidentially appointed United States Marshal. You have to set the example that you want others to follow. You have to maintain your integrity and do the right thing in the face of adversity. I never wasted any of my challenges, and I advise you don't waste your challenges either, because that's the only way that you can truly stretch and grow. Because once you go through them and you overcome them, there is wisdom to be gained in that process. So be thankful for your challenges. Don't hold grudges, forgive, extend grace, and accept your challenges wholeheartedly. Leadership is all about building relationships, and that's regardless of your age, your gender, your title, position. And it may sound small and insignificant, but one thing that I've learned as a leader is that you must smile. Be friendly, be confident, and never lose sight of who you are. As we look to the road ahead, each of us are in the positions that we're in today because we have purpose. We are part of the solution for paving the way for others to follow. So don't just look at yourself as just being another leader, another employee, but look at yourself as being the difference. Thank you.
Well, I feel like saying, can I get an amen, right? We have time for a few questions if anyone out there has one for Marshal Boyden. please. Yep, they'll bring you a mic.
This morning I was talking to my husband, who's a big fan of yours, and he's afraid of you, says. But he asked a question, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to ask her. But since they gave me a mic, I'm going to ask publicly. He wants to know, excuse my language, how a badass like you can be so girly at the same time.
Never lose sight of who you are. But no, seriously, you know, a lot of people ask that question because a lot of times women will, you know, they'll wear the square shoes and look like a guy, but really men don't want to work with women that look like, you know, just to each its own. I like to be feminine. That's why I'm here, because I'm different, right? So I embrace who I am wholeheartedly. Yes, thank you for that question.
Hi.
Hi.
I noticed on the map that it looks like your territory is a huge, vast part of California. It includes all of Northern California, which I define as north of Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, why isn't there a U.S. Marshal's office up there? It's all Sacramento, Fresno.
It is. Well, unfortunately, we don't have enough staff to have deputies at every single courthouse. We do have a courthouse in Reading, and when we need to go up there, we go up there to serve our judge, as well as we have a courthouse in Yosemite as well. So we do the best we can with all the courthouses we have in the district, but that's just where they've stationed us. Yeah. But thank you for the question.
Thank you for a great talk, and I feel very comfortable knowing that we're safe with you at the helm. My question is, how did you feel when the Chief Justice was under threat, and then the aftermath? How do you see the direction for the protection of the justices, and is the system in danger?
So what we've done is, so the marshals, we generally protect the Supreme Court justices when they travel, right? They have their own marshals and their own security. But because of all the threats that have occurred, they've turned to us because this is what we do. This is what we expertise in. We protect our judges. So right now there's a lot of threats going on. They've heightened over time, and so we are continuously protecting our Supreme Court justices in the DC area. As far as here locally, it's pretty rare. We don't get too many, but if we get them, we go out and we investigate them. But in terms of the overall question that you have, I mean, I could tell you that threats have increased.
Marshal Boyd, thank you so much for coming out. It's an honor to have you here today. My question, I'd like to know a little bit more about becoming a U.S. Marshal. I don't know that much about it. You hear about police academies, the CHP Academy, Monaco for FBI, things like that. What's the process of getting to become a U.S. Marshal? Is there an academy that you go to? How does that work?
Yes, there is an academy, and we're right now in the process of revamping our hiring, so we're not hiring currently, but generally it'll go out on USA Jobs when we do hire, and you'll go through the interview process. You have to do a physical, you have to do a physical fitness test, which requires a 1.5-mile run, sit-ups, push-ups, and I think I already said interview. So once you go through all these things and you pass that test, and you get accepted, then you have to go down to FLETC, which is the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia, for a 16-week training academy. And fortunate enough for me, because I was a student intern, I graduated college on a Saturday and I went down to the training academy on a Monday. So when people ask you, man, you look young, you have 20 years in, that's because I started at 22. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.